This is Land of Havilah, Matthew 13a, verse 1. On that day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the seaside. Great multitudes gathered to him, so that he entered into a boat, and sat, and all the multitudes stood on the beach. He spoke to them many things in parables, saying, Behold, a farmer went out to sow. As he sowed, some seeds fell by the roadside, and the birds came and devoured them. Others fell on rocky ground, where they didn't have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, because they had no depth of earth. When the sun had risen, they were scorched. Because they had no root, they withered away. Others fell among thorns. The thorns grew up and choked them. Others fell on good soil, and yielded fruit, some 100 times as much, some 60, and some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Comment, that was the parable of the farmer. It also appears in Mark 4 and Luke 8. In verses 1 and 2, Jesus told it from a boat to a large crowd that was standing on the shore. He'll fully explain it coming up. But first, verse 10. The disciples came and said to him, Why do you speak to them in parables? He answered them, To you it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but it is not given to them. For whoever has, to him will be given, and he'll have abundance. But whoever doesn't have, from him will be taken away even that which he has. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they don't see, and hearing they don't hear, neither do they understand. In them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, By hearing you will hear, and will in no way understand. Seeing you will see, and will in no way perceive. For this people's heart has grown callous, their ears are dull of hearing, they have closed their eyes, or else perhaps they might perceive with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their heart, and would turn again, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For most certainly I tell you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see the things which you see, and didn't see them, and to hear the things which you hear, and didn't hear them. Comment, for 8 straight verses that we just read, Jesus drove home one point, that God gives understanding to some, but not to others. We might wonder about the justice of it. Why would God withhold understanding? Or is it more of a matter of what Isaiah said in verse 15, quote, They have closed their eyes, end quote, which would make the people themselves responsible for their own blindness? If we search the World English Bible for hardened hearts, there are 31 references. In some cases, God did the hardening, but in about an equal number of cases, man did the hardening. If we search for stiff necks, there are 17 references, but almost always in these cases, it was the person or the nation that did the stiffening, not God. Romans 1:28 gives sort of an explanation that as people refuse to listen, God makes them unable to listen. Quote, Even as they refused to have God in their knowledge, God gave them up to a reprobate mind. End quote. In other words, if anyone wants to stiffen his neck or harden his heart, God goes along with it. Even as they refused, God gave them up. It was a simultaneous thing that as man did, so did God. Proverbs 23:23 says, Buy the truth and don't sell it, which implies that the truth costs us something. To know the truth, we must buy it, so to speak. The price of it is facing up to it and aligning ourselves with it. Obviously, some don't want to pay the purchase price of aligning themselves with the truth, which is God. They'd rather believe a falsehood, so God allows them. In verse 12, it turns out to be an all or none proposition, quote, For whoever has, to him will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever doesn't have, from him will be taken away even that which he has, end quote. The buyer of the truth will eventually wind up with all of it, and the non-buyer will wind up with nothing. The price of the truth is negligible for what we get in return. Coming up, Jesus explains the parable of the farmer, verse 18. Hear then the parable of the farmer. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and doesn't understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away that which has been sown in his heart. This is what was sown by the roadside. What was sown on the rocky places, this is he who hears the word and immediately with joy receives it, yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while. When oppression or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he stumbles. What was sown among the thorns? This is he who hears the word, but the cares of this age and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he becomes unfruitful. What was sown on the good ground? This is he who hears the word and understands it, who most certainly bears fruit and produces, some 100 times as much, some 60, and some 30. Comment: the seed is the word of God. The various types of soil are various people. The enemies of the word include Satan in verse 19, oppression and persecution in verse 21, and in verse 22, the cares of this age and deceitfulness of riches. We should protect and nurture the word that's in us from all threats. We should buy the truth and not sell it for any price, not let anything get in the way of it or supersede it, not let anything choke it or kill it. Now a different parable, not about kinds of ground, but kinds of seed. Verse 24. He set another parable before them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while people slept, his enemy came and sowed darnel weeds also among the wheat, and went away. But when the blade sprang up and produced fruit, then the darnel weeds appeared also. The servants of the householder came and said to him, Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where did these darnel weeds come from? He said to them, An enemy has done this. The servants asked him, Do you want us to go and gather them up? But he said, No, lest perhaps while you gather up the darnel weeds, you root up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and in the harvest time I will tell the reapers, First gather up the darnel weeds, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Comment: the explanation for this parable is coming up as well, but there'll be a couple of other parables first, all of it at landofhavilah.net, Matthew 13b.